Listen up.
Welcome to the PowerShell Podcast, the podcast for PowerShell and the PowerShell community. And now, here's your host, Andrew Plaw.
All right, welcome to another episode of the PowerShell Podcast at PowerShell Conference EU, Malmö, Sweden, 2025, with none other than returning guest Miriam Wiesner, Security Research Program Manager at Microsoft, and returning guest, and a little bit of a PowerShell celebrity. What's it like to meet all the people here this week who've maybe seen your work that you haven't had a chance to see in person before?
So it's like just meeting so many friends again, because I think my first PSConf was 2017.
Oh, wow.
And I skipped a few, but came back all the time. And so basically meeting all the PowerShell friends again and making new friends. So, yeah.
Lots of new friends. Yeah,
Lots of new friends.
It's been awesome to get to meet people like you, a lot of Microsofties in person. You have a lot of coworkers from kind of all around the world that you're getting to kind of see here.
Actually, I also just get to know new coworkers because in my role, I work less with the PowerShell team. But from PowerShell PSConf, I just get to know them. And so some of them I already knew from last year and from other conferences. And some of them I'm just getting to know.
And so you're the Security Research Program Manager. What were you doing in 2017 with PowerShell?
In 2017, I was a PFE at Microsoft.
Yes.
So that's almost 8 years before. And back then, I was actually trying to convince my customer how awesome GIA is, just enough administration.
Yeah.
And turns out, still so little customers are using GIA. I was really, really passionate about it back then. And this was also my first presentation ever. So PSConf is where my presentation career was born, actually.
Wow.
And so back then, it was also, of course, about GIA, my talk.
Yeah, the principle of least privilege is something that you should embrace at every opportunity.
Yes, it was always security.
Yes. So that's interesting. So you went from being a PFE, hands-on with customers, with the tech, to was your next role then a program manager for the security team?
It was already a program manager, but I was working as a CXE PM. So basically, CXE is customer experience.
Yeah.
So I was responsible for bringing the customer experience into the product development. And I worked for Microsoft Defender for Endpoint back then.
Awesome. So you're kind of like that bridge layer where you're technical and you have the soft skills and the presentation skills as well, which makes sense. I guess you've been doing it for so long, you've kind of built up. And I got to sit into one of your talks, which I will talk about both of your talks while we're here today, but I got to sit in your cookies talk. Can you tell me a little bit about what you talked about? Yes.
So basically, I came up with the cookies talk because of last year. Last year, I had a session about Microsoft Graph and was presenting a real-world attack. But in the original scenario, there was no MFA present. That means the attackers just did a password spraying, grabbed the credentials, and used them to cause chaos. But since we had some recent security changes, I would say, I was not allowed to turn off MFA in my demo environment back then. And so last year, I said, okay, now imagine this without MFA, but I had to enter MFA and say, okay, now we are registered. But usually this would not happen in the original attack. And this led to a lot of people just asking, hey, I would actually be interested in how attackers are bypassing MFA. And so this year I was like, okay, let's take this feedback and let's show them how attackers are bypassing MFA. And the demo I showed in my first session was actually, the attacker was the Cookie Monster. And Cookie Monster loves cookies. And so the Cookie Monster was sending a link to the victim user, which extracted then the cookie database from the browser, copied it on Cookie Monster's device, Cookie Monster extracted the cookies, replayed them in the browser. And during the demo, I was throwing cookies, by the way.
Yes, no, you were the Cookie Monster. I saw.
I helped the Cookie Monster.
A couple people got hit.
I try to not hit too hard, but cookies for everybody.
Okay, so for those who are out there who may not know what a cookie is, they know it's like a browser thing, but what is a cookie?
So a cookie is a digital file with some parameters and attributes in it. And cookies are used to maintain the session. So whenever you do web development, you stumbled over cookies when you worked on sessions.
Yeah.
And because if you establish a session, so you are logging in, you have your web page, you're logging in, and you want to stay logged in. You don't want to enter your credentials all the time again.
Right.
And this is why you have a session in the background, which means this guarantees that you are logged in and that you can act as yourself. And the thing is, the session is stored in a cookie. And if you extract the cookie, you also have the session.
Yeah, that makes sense. So is there a difference between whenever I just log in and whenever I log in and click the button for stay logged in?
Yes, there is also a difference. So when you log in, regularly, usually the session just runs out after a certain time. So with regular access token, the session is valid for 1 hour. But so now we are talking about the Azure portal. And with Azure portal, you can also say stay logged in, also for other services. And there is this cookie called ESTS auth persistent, which guarantees that you can be logged in for way longer than 1 hour. And actually, if this cookie is present and if you're extracted, then you have a longer time than just only this hour and can log in. And so this was the cookie that we were extracting in this demo.
And one thing that I thought was very interesting was you used Firefox for it. And someone had a very interesting question because Firefox doesn't encrypt the cookies, whereas Edge and Chrome do encrypt the cookies.
Yes.
Do you know when that happened? And it's very surprising to me because I would have assumed a lot of developer type people really enjoy Firefox, but to hear that those cookies are not encrypted, and just because they're encrypted doesn't mean that there's not ways to still get them. But yeah, do you know if when cookies started being encrypted?
I don't know. I'm sorry.
I don't know either.
I did not follow Chrome or Edge that well. I just know. And for Firefox, there's the Cookie SQLite database, and not encrypted. You can just pull it out, and this is why I was using it for the demo.
Yeah, keep it simple.
But of course, there are also ways to just decrypt Chrome and Edge. Yeah. So you should not feel too secure when just using Chrome or Edge, but I will definitely consider my browser choices.
Yeah.
And so basically, if you just extract the user key, you can also just decrypt the cookies. And there's also another scenario for Edge and Chrome. You can also, also with a headless browser, you can, I think, enter in debug mode for Chrome, and you have a similar effect. So that you also can extract the cookies in a decrypted mode when you use the debug mode and a headless browser. So there was another scenario that I had in mind for the demo, but I thought it was way cooler the way I did it.
It was awesome.
Thank you.
So one thing that I'll see is someone on Facebook will say, oh, hey, sorry, all my stuff was hacked. And so I guess from what you're saying, there's one method that could happen where they click a link and it takes them to another like an imitation of a Facebook login page. They enter their credentials and then they just, get whatever you typed in and they'll try and log in as you. But I'm guessing, I don't know if you know this, but perhaps they're also clicking a link, and another method of attack would be for them to just take the cookie for the session.
Yes.
Is that, I'm guessing since you talked about it, it's kind of a common attack vector. But when that happens, do you know if it's running code locally or is it just extracting it through the website and accessing the cookie from the browser?
So there are many ways.
So I ask a hard question.
Yes. So basically everything. So you can run code locally on the machine to extract, for example, the cookie database that is in the file system. But you can also access the local session storage or the local storage or the session storage and just extract the access tokens. So there are those JOT tokens also saved in the session storage. So there was also part in my demo where I showed that there are actually those JOT tokens stored. And I have a little script in the demo which you can use to just iterate through the session storage. You can also change it to local storage and to just find all the JOT tokens that are present there and profit.
Profit.
So via XSS attacks, for example, this is also possible, right?
Cross-site scripting.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, one thing I really liked about your talk is that it kind of broke down something where I think people will hear about hacking and this kind of thing, and there's maybe some concepts and some things like cookies that they haven't explored before, and they'll think, oh, it's just hacker magic. I think you really did a great job at breaking it down into like human terms where, despite me not being a security researcher, I'm able to follow along and get benefit out of it and get some insight into real world attacks. And these are things that we as IT professionals need to be mindful of, especially, I like to always remind people there's a big ecosystem of money behind attackers. So you really need to be doing what you can to defend, because there's a lot of incentive at getting access to your cookies, especially if you're on a work machine connected to a business. They could wreak some havoc there.
Yeah. And I also want to emphasize, because there was a question after the talk, so not in the Q&A section, but after the talk, somebody was also like, oh, Miriam said that device authentication is evil. I did not say that. And you really need device authentication in some cases, because you can't always log in. And I did not say that device authentication is evil, because you need it, and attackers are using what is there.
Yeah.
But how to protect is you need to build layers of protection. So basically, also last slide was like a fort where you had layers, where you have the water stream around the fort. I don't know the word.
The moat.
A moat. Moat.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and the moat, and everything, all the towers, and you just need to build your layers to make it as hard as possible for the attacker to extract your cookies, to extract your identities, and to abuse stuff. So you just have to make it as hard as possible to get something out. You have to destroy the return of invest for the attacker.
Yeah, defense in depth is important, because you want it to be hard enough to hack your company that they just move on to an easier target. So do what you can to make yourself as hard. I've also heard the Swiss cheese model. Like when you stack a bunch of Swiss cheese on top of each other, Swiss cheese is the cheese with little holes in it.
Yeah.
Maybe there's holes in each layer, but if you have them on top of each other, there's no way to penetrate the whole thing.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I find security to be such an interesting topic, because we think, at least some people think, that it only applies to security professionals. But IT professionals of any sort are security professionals.
Yes.
They're responsible for implementing and making sure things are secured. And if you're not spending time kind of keeping up to date with things in the security world, doing what you can to secure things, it's not going to be a good day, because technology keeps moving on, things keep improving. And if you're not actually configuring your policies, not everything in the world is secure by default. You're going to have to spend some time and make it customized for your environment, where you can find that happy balance between getting business done and doing it securely.
Yeah. And attackers will use what is there. So never feel secure, even if you're just using a productivity feature.
Yeah.
If this is the only way to get in, they will find a way.
You talked earlier about MFA. And I know that MFA was a very big topic because so many places need to implement it. From your perspective, have we solved that problem? Are there still a ton of people who haven't implemented MFA?
Yeah.
Really?
So basically, there are still too many people who have not implemented MFA. And just think of all your social media accounts. Have you implemented MFA for all of them?
Not all of them. All the ones I don't want to get hacked, I have.
Yes.
And MFA that's not text as well.
Yeah. So it adds another layer of work and time. And so people are lazy, and they are not using MFA all the time. Also, companies need to implement MFA.
Yeah.
There are also other MFA methods that you can use besides of opening an app on your phone and entering a code. You can also use certificate-based authentication. Adds at least another layer of security to your authentication. That means it's the right device, for example. So this is also a good way. But yeah, so.
Yeah. Well, I think that kind of pairs nicely and can transition into our next topic, because to do some of this stuff, one, you're going to need to sell it as a win. Okay, you implement MFA. That's a huge win. You can't just go silently about that. But let's talk about your next talk that you gave. What was the topic and title of that?
I don't remember the exact title.
Finding the North Star.
But I could tell what the session was about.
Yeah.
So exactly, it was Finding the North Star. And I think the subtitle, I think it was Find Your North Star, Unlocking the Secrets to Success for Your Career, something like that. I'm not good with title remembering. I'm sorry.
I know we have to make the title so they punch.
Yes.
Yes.
They just need to convince the people to join your session. And everything else is the hard work that you put in the session. And so basically, I mentored a lot of people in my career at Microsoft. And not only Microsoft people, by the way, also from other companies. And I also, navigated through my career, basically.
Yeah.
And we talked earlier about the career steps that I took. And I started as a PFE at Microsoft. And at some point, people told me that if I want to stay in Germany, the best role, the highest career path that I could take would be a CX EPM. And I suddenly stumbled in a situation where I actually was recommended for a CX EPM role. I interviewed and I got accepted. And that was so mind-blowing. So first I was super proud because I made it into this role. What the hell? Sorry for the bad words, by the way.
All right.
And then after some days, after some weeks, I was like, okay, well, you just reached your goal. What next?
Yeah.
And I had no idea because I had no next goal. And this just depressed me so hard that I fell into a deep motivation hole. And I was like, okay, you need to stop now living for the next role, only jumping from role to role and have no big goal. And this is when I came up with a North Star goal. And a North Star goal is something that is so far away that you possibly can't achieve it. And maybe you will never achieve it, but it's there and guiding your way.
Yes.
And you have also influences. So, for example, maybe you have a family, maybe you have certain skills that pull you in other directions and people recommend certain paths for you. And you think, maybe I explore them. Or you also have other work environment conditions that just shape your path. But everything just after you have found your North Star goal, it's going in the right direction.
Exactly. Yeah. Because we can't always predict, hey, I'm going to get X job, which is going to lead to Y job, Z job, and then I'll get there. Yeah, I found that really helpful for me. It's like to have a general direction where you want to go. You can't connect all the dots, but as you go through your career, if you can keep that in mind, it can lead to opportunities and you'll know kind of when it's the right time to go here or there.
Yeah.
So that's very insightful. Because I think for a lot of people, you sort of met many people's North Star. You know, you were quite accomplished and successful and doing great things in a great place and sharing that knowledge with others, which I think is really what, for me, is what I look for in success. Or are you just doing it for you, or are you finding ways to bring up others along the way? And I think you do a great job at that.
Thank you so much. I just love helping others somehow.
Yeah. For me, that's a big part of my North Star, is like finding ways that I can leverage my skills to help the most people possible.
Yeah.
And so I've sort of, for me, kind of like you with CX EPM, what I'm doing now is sort of like, it was a North Star, and having to find a new North Star and what that could look like. And I'm not really in a rush for that next step, but I'm keeping in mind the opportunities and building in a certain direction where if it doesn't happen, I'm going to be okay. I'm happy with what I'm doing. My bills are paid for. My family's happy. But it would be really awesome if some of these things happened and, we reach that North Star.
Yeah. And for me, my North Star goal is to have the skills of a Google Project Zero researcher. And this is so far away. I don't know if I ever will be able to achieve that. But I know, or back then I knew that the next step was to be in security research.
Yeah.
And now learning more C#.
Yeah.
And binary exploitation and reverse engineering. Well, I have some basics, but I need to improve.
Interesting. So you are in a project management role, but your goal is more on the technical side of things. And it's cool because at this conference, as we were talking about with the cookies talk, that sort of is leading towards that North Star to a certain degree, right?
Exactly. So that was my hobby presentation. So it was not official Microsoft work that I did there. So that was just my own.
Yeah.
And
and you're sharing it with others along the way, learning things, having fun, and also kind of building what you're doing now, right? It builds more public presence and that kind of thing, which is always good. But so when you're giving mentorship to people, you mentioned the North Star.
Yes.
And I've been mentoring a lot more people here as well. And I find myself going to some similar advice to pretty much everyone. Is there any kind of trends that you find of what you can help people with when you're doing mentorship?
So you mean topic-wise? What topics I'm mentoring?
I mean, maybe topics, maybe like you kind of find that some piece of advice or some kind of guidance is something that you give to pretty much everyone you mentor.
So my default guidance is the North Star goal, find a North Star goal, because so few people really have a North Star goal and are not really clear what they would love to be if they could be everything.
Yeah.
But it also depends on the people. So not everybody has the same challenges, but they have similar challenges, and it depends. Some people want to also improve with public speaking or want to give better answers if they are put on the spot. And for that, I think that is pretty common, that if you are being put on that spot, then you just freeze, fight or flight. And I also have this, especially when I'm talking on stage. So this was a hard thing that I worked on, that if I'm feeling pressured, the first thing that you need to do is to be able to notice when you're in the stress situation and that you are not feeling comfortable. Because if you notice, you can act on it. And if you act on it, you need to be sure you have time to think. Regardless if you're on stage or in a conversation or something, you have time to think. You can make a pause. Nobody will hate you for making a pause. Sometimes it's even better because dramatic pause or something.
Yes.
And then you can think, what do I need to be more comfortable again? And then act on it and do it. And it helped me a lot with those presentations on stage to think, okay, what do I need now to get more comfortable again? And allow myself time to think.
Yeah.
And to answer. And sometimes, especially in the Q&A, it's completely fine to say, I don't know, because you don't need to know everything. Even if you are a specialist in that area, you don't need to know. You can say, that is a very good question. I need to follow up on that. So let me take it with you later.
Yep. And that's a great tip for work, but also for interviews. And just in general in life, you don't want to find yourself in a position where you're having to pretend to know everything all the time. I've done that before in my career, and it's not a great place to be. Doesn't feel good, and you sort of actually isolate yourself, and you don't get as much stuff done. For me, if I see someone who's honest and say, hey, I don't actually know, let's get back to that, I have more trust in them.
Yes.
Because I know that they're going to be honest. If there is something they can speak to, they will. But if not, they're a human. That's perfectly fine. There's a lot in the world to know, especially in technology. There's more than any one person could know. Despite, at a conference like this, there are some people, like maybe Fred comes to mind, where you feel like they know everything. Yes. He doesn't know everything, and he knows that he doesn't know everything, and he seeks people with a different perspective.
Yes.
Which is, one thing I notice about you is you seem to have a high degree of emotional intelligence.
Thank you.
Right. And you're also in a position in your career, and I think sounding back to the past, it sounds like multiple times in your career, you've sort of benefited from being able to communicate with different people, connect with the technical audience, with a less technical audience, and kind of merging those worlds. Have you always had those skills, or is that something you've kind of had to work with as you've grown?
So I heard that part with emotional intelligence quite often. This was also why I moved into the current PM role. So it's still a technical PM role, but people told me that I would make an impact with the emotional intelligence. But with the social skills, I had to work on really, really hard. So I sometimes I'm really tactless, and sometimes I do have the same social skills as Sheldon Cooper. So I really worked hard on that. I was not always good with talking, with presentation, with answering, or just being my authentic self. This is really hard, I think, being authentic.
Absolutely.
And allowing yourself to be who you are. And so especially for being authentic and being able to talk to people, it helped me a lot to go on stage, to go out of my comfort zone. So if you look up my first presentations, which were actually at PSConf EU in 2017, you see I'm so nervous. And I'm still nervous, actually. Before I'm going on stage, I'm a complete mess. So it has not stopped, but it really enabled me to talk with people and also not to put people on pedestals. So I'm still doing that from time to time, and it sucks. I should stop that.
It's hard.
But I'm constantly working on myself, and
I think one thing you said, social skills. They're skills that can be learned.
Yes.
Early in my career, I did not have many, but one step at a time, you can sort of start learning these things. And I see it also in others in the community. Like I mentioned, some more technical people. A trend that I see is sometimes technical people will just go and go and go.
Yeah.
But I've seen some of those people over the years go and go and go, and also look at who they're talking to and see if they're engaged or disengaged. And if they're getting disengaged, ask, hey, did that make sense to you? Or are you following along? And if they're not, being open to not just ranting, essentially.
Yeah.
That's something that I struggled with and am doing better with, eye contact, things like that. You also mentioned being your authentic self, which is hard because I think so often times in life, like coming from childhood into adulthood, we're just kind of responding.
Yes.
We don't necessarily even know who we are. As we're growing, maybe you find out who you are, you work on yourself, you get a good sense of self. And then you're able to be your authentic self. And when you are, like the way that you are, it resonates with others. And it creates a safety where maybe they feel safe to be themselves around you. And anyone, you don't have to be like super professional, whatever it is. If I see someone being their authentic selves, it's awesome. And it's like there's like a subtle glow to them. And that's why I enjoy a conference like this, where people feel safe to be themselves.
Yeah.
You get to see folks just in their element shining.
Yeah. But it's super frightening to be your authentic self. So I'm afraid all the time to show parts of myself. So I'm vulnerable.
Yeah.
But at those conferences, if you're vulnerable, people will just build up on it and will push you, and so in a good direction, and accept you how you are. And this is also what makes me more confident. And so also a topic I always struggle with. We talked about it earlier.
Yeah. But I think it's one of those things where you expose yourself over years to these more uncomfortable things. You gain some confidence. You have some good experiences. You maybe give a talk that goes well. You share something personally. Someone else has that same experience. And over time, it becomes easier. But it's not like you can read a book and just overnight you're changed. You have to have that North Star.
Yes.
Right?
Practice, fail often, fail fast.
Yeah, these same principles from IT apply to personal growth as well.
Yeah.
And one thing I really like about the soft skills and, becoming emotionally intelligent, that kind of thing, is there's statistics that show it, but it leads to more money. So if that,
I should tell my manager.
But that can be a encouraging thing or motivational for some. But for me, it's a little bit more motivating to just feel happier and feel better and feel like you belong, because these communities are very welcoming and you can find that belonging. But it may take a couple of years for you to kind of fully come out of your shell. And in doing the podcast, I've had a lot of people who maybe over the years have reached out, and I've maybe pushed them a little bit in the direction. And, to see people go from being somebody who maybe doesn't know PowerShell very much to doing more, writing blogs, becoming MVPs, seeing that journey, it's not unique to them. It's not like you have to be a superstar or a rock star. It's just one step at a time over who knows how long. But if you're heading in the right direction, you may reach that North Star goal, whatever it is for you.
Yeah.
So, Miriam, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody out there, for listening. Check out the PowerShell Podcast every Monday, PowerShell Wednesday, every single Wednesday, discord.gg/PDQ. Give us a like, comment, subscribe, all the good things. Miriam, people are connecting with you. They kind of want to see you as you go towards that North Star. Where can we find you on the internet?
So I'm on LinkedIn, Miriam Wiesner. I'm still on Twitter. I don't post as much as I used to in the past.
Yeah.
But I'm also on Blue Sky. On Twitter, it's, I think, Miriam Xyra, Xyra. It's from an old World of Warcraft nickname, but that's another story. On Blue Sky, I think I'm Miriam Wiesner. And so just reach out, keep in touch.
Yes, definitely. Reach out. You never know what can happen when you put yourself out there, make a new connection. Even if you're just sharing, hey, I really appreciated that talk you gave or the podcast you were on or whatever it is, that can be the starting point for something good. Maybe you just leave that comment and then a year later you see PS Conf EU, and all of a sudden you have the great startings to a great conversation like we had here today. And I look forward to hopefully being here next year and maybe we'll have another chat. But thank you everybody for listening. You can find me on socials at Andrew Platek. But that's all we got for you today. Take care, everybody.
This is the PowerShell Podcast, a production of PDQ.com.
Most of you know the PowerShell Podcast is sponsored and made possible by PDQ. I've had questions from listeners asking, what's PDQ and what do you do? Well, we help IT teams automate endpoint management. PDQ Connect is our cloud-based tool for real-time software deployment, patching, scripting, remote access, and vulnerability management. It's fast, flexible, and built for people who just want things to work. If you want to see it in action, head to pdq.com/podcast and check out our interactive demo. No signups, no emails, no credit card, just a fast and easy way to explore how it works. That's pdq.com/podcast. Automated endpoint management that doesn't slow you down.
Thanks for listening to the PowerShell Podcast. The PowerShell Podcast is a PDQ production, making device management simple, secure, and pretty damn quick.